Challenge your potential and the sky's the limit. Join me, Emily Ibbott, in a diary to empower. From a starting point of a love for dance, my life has evolved, but along the way, I've learned so much in how we develop, learn and grow from those around us to elevate us even further on. Be inspired and be open to learn, and no limit will ever exist. Come along with me on my own journey in personal development, but with guests who have empowered me and are still doing so in my own journey. Hey, and welcome back. Today I am joined by the lovely Holly. Welcome. And also known on Insta as Femina Health. And I'm really excited to have you today and just to talk about hormones. Yeah. More than anything else. So for all my clients, the ladies, and even, to be honest, the males as well, because you should probably know about this just as much. So we obviously first met at the She Strides Wellness event, which has just continued to explode, which is just epic and really cool. And it was really amazing just how sort of just where you were explaining things. And I think in line with training, it's really useful to know. And, you know, just that backing knowledge behind things that we may arise during our training, whether that be marathons or triathlons or training and bodybuilding, whatever it may be. There's so many levels, whatever it may entail, the sport that you are into, or even just general exercise and how we're feeling healthy and understanding what's going on inside, no matter what phase we're in. But I guess to kind of start with, you spoke a lot that you're doing your research and PhD at the moment. So do you want to start with that? Like, how did that come about? Like, and sort of what your PhD is in as well?
Yeah. So my background basically started, I was a high level swimmer. So I swam for Rushmore, which is just like a little local club, and went from counties to regionals to being in a national relay team. And within that time, I actually experienced like a knee injury myself. So I went and I had physiotherapy, and I was just so fascinated. I remember like lying down on the couch and just reading this physio book at like the age of 13, and I was like, wow, what are all these things? So since then I sort of, and like understanding like training and exercises, it's literally my core. Like my blood breathes training. And I then went on and did my sports therapy degree.
Cool.
So I did that for a few years. I did my placement year at a football club. So a professional football club, Bournemouth.
Okay, yeah.
And then obviously that was cut short during COVID. Anyway, went back to uni, did my final year, and did my dissertation actually in knee injuries and like patellofemoral pain syndrome. And it was only then that my lecturer was like, "Did you know that female are actually more prone to having knee injuries?" I was like, "Sorry, what?" Why us?
Tell me, tell me more.
Me? And so it's then obviously like doing my dissertation, came out of uni, been in clinical practice for a few years now. And I was like, actually, and then I started like learning more about my cycle. I've suffered with PMS for God knows how long. And I have been on every single form of hormonal contraceptive pill, implant, coil, the whole lot. Like I am... So I was just like, well, why is this? Like, why is it not working? And I obviously like read up so much more about it. And actually, it was funnily enough, like I speak to so many clients and so many women every single day about their menstrual cycle. Loads of my women who come into the clinic, they're actually more likely to be injured during their ovulation phase.
Which is just crazy to think about.
And it is literally due to the changes in the hormones. So there was that, and I was like, and I started reading up more about that, and I was like, I need to find a PhD in this because there is so much more research that needs to be done, and I need to know everything.
And I need to be behind it.
And then there was this other thing as well with like my menopausal women, and this is a study that I'd love to do, where they put the patch.
Okay.
Varies where, like, if they put the patch on their glute and their hip, far more likely to suffer from hip pain. I don't know if it's a thing, but I think I'm onto something.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
But yeah, so basically that's sort of like how it happened, and that's sort of why I started going on. So now my PhD is in the effects of female sex hormones on knee injuries.
Incredible. And I think, isn't it crazy how just from one simple thing that when you had physio at, I don't know, 13, that it's just been kind of that
building blocks.
Of like, oh, what's this? Oh, what's this?
Yeah.
You know, let me research about this. Let's understand this. Because I think, and it emphasizes so much that we truly, really don't know enough about what our bodies actually do.
No.
Like, we take for granted that we get up each morning and we do what we need to do. We go to work, we do this, you know, and actually there are so many things happening inside. And it's not necessarily a case to, I think some people can panic about the things and changes and pains. And I actually think it's just being aware of it that gives us so much more knowledge to understand why that might be happening. Okay, that's because of that. That's because of that. That's because this is happening. And then we're like, oh, okay, we have a bit more, we can detach ourselves from it slightly more.
Yeah, definitely. And the clients that I have now, they're sort of learning about how when they are within their menstrual phase of their cycle, what foods to eat.
Yeah.
And different foods and the way in which you plan your training cycle and your nutrition around your menstrual cycle can make such a huge difference to your overall well-being.
Definitely. And we spoke a little bit about before the podcast started that actually, obviously, you and I, we train very, very differently. But it's very different to kind of sort of what I would say sort of just general lifestyle and how you could amend your training to if you are training for specific things.
Yeah.
And I think even before, when looking at it from a simple point of view with hormones, there's actually, it's quite a whirlwind before you even delve into the training, the nutrition and how you're like trying to really start to pick it apart. But I guess for people out there, do you want to just, through the different phases, simply give off what kind of things will happen? And I know you spoke about it at the She Strides event as well, in each phase. And actually, because I think some people, we don't actually know. I think a lot of people don't. And I speak about it with my clients. I tell them in their check-in, okay, what phase are we in? Where are we at?
Nice.
Because I want to know. Because I'm like, well, this could be why this is happening, or why you're feeling like this, or why this is maybe taken a bit of a turn in your training, or why your nutrition feels a certain way. So I guess, starting with the start of the cycle, where to kind of just start with it, I guess.
I think what a lot of people don't realise is like what actually is day one of your menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
And I mean, before I even started doing all my research, I didn't have a clue. Like, we weren't taught about that at school at all.
You kind of are just told, well,
here's a sanitary towel.
This is what happens.
So day one of your menstrual cycle is the first day of menstruation. So the first day that you bleed. So you'll be on your period for around 3 to 5 days. The average person is around like 4 or 5 days. Then the next phase would be your follicular phase. So within your follicular phase, you know, your estrogen is rising and your progesterone is just sort of down here somewhere.
Just chilling.
He's just having a nice time. And then essentially your estrogen is what it then brings you into your ovulation phase. So your ovulation phase is that phase where you are going to be the most fertile. So if you want to have babies,
that's the time to pay attention to.
I love it when I read about it. It's like increased libido.
I know how the formal words are put, shall we say.
Increased libido. And then after your ovulation phase, you've obviously got that luteal phase, which is when your estrogen starts to deplete. And this is when it's absolutely crucial if you are trying to have babies, because you need that progesterone to stay high. If your progesterone is not high, then your egg can't stay fertile in the womb. And then that's why people lose their baby.
Learning something new all the time.
I know, honestly. So like when I do my hormone testing and people's progesterone's low, I'm like, honey, you need that higher.
We need to get that up.
So yeah, I think it is really important, the fact that people do know which phase they are in, especially when it comes to training.
Yeah. And I think it's important, you touched on it at the start, that the sort of average person is like, I don't know, 3 to 5 days, 4 to 5 days bleed. But that is the average person, obviously.
Yeah.
It can vary. And, you know, we can go into such a rabbit hole with things surrounding the sort of menstrual cycle and things, but we'll try and keep it.
Yeah,
keep
I know. I'm
simple.
Like, how
we
deep
can
do you want to go?
But it's really important to sort of emphasize that, you know, if you are experiencing the extremes of things, that it's something to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, the average cycle is obviously like 28 to 35 days. I mean, I definitely sit in the later end, like my menstrual cycle is like 34 days. So, and I only bleed for 3 days. But I mean, it's absolutely marvelous for me. But it does. But and then it's just about not worrying about that, and it's like
that could be normal for you.
It's 100% normal for me. Whereas I have clients who come in and they're like literally 21 days bleeding for 7, like. But that is normal for them.
Yeah.
And it's finding your normal that I think is really important, especially with finding your normal when you are going through that perimenopausal, menopausal phase of your life. Like you need to know your normal to know sort of where you're at and where your hormones are at.
And I think so many people, and I've had conversations, and I imagine you have too, of people being like, yeah, I've not bled for like 6, 8, whatever months. And you're like, okay, like, let's think about what is going on. And in terms of kind of what I do now, at the back end of a bodybuilding prep, a lot of people will lose their cycle.
Yeah,
it's it's very normal for that period of time, because it's basically your body being like, nah, we're not ready for anything, therefore we're not going to give you anything, sort of thing. And it's so important and to sort of regain that cycle as quickly as you can post-show. It is only for a certain length of time. By this stage, bodybuilding is not healthy. I emphasize this every time, but it's really interesting to touch on, because your body is pretty much in the bin. But I think it comes into other aspects of people's training and what they're discovering. But I think also for the average person, I've spoken to lifestyle people that haven't had a bleed in so long, and they're like, oh, it's the normal. And I'm like, no, that is not the normal.
It is not normal whatsoever. Obviously, unless you're on the pill or something like that, then that is somewhat normal if you're taking your pill back to back. But I think it is really important for people to realise that the bleed you get when you are on the pill isn't actually a period. It's a withdrawal bleed. Your hormones aren't doing what mine are doing every single month. Yours are just staying still, and then you're having that withdrawal bleed, which is just the break from the pill, essentially, with the lining coming out. So I do think that it is really important for people to understand that as well. And when I do sort of hormone testing, people also think that I can't test their hormones when they're on the pill. They're like, well, but your estrogen and progesterone is still going up and down.
There's still stuff going on inside,
I'm like, you're not just flat in the middle there. Things are still happening here. So I think, obviously, when do hormone testing, for example, if I was to hormone test you, I'd get the amount of whatever pill you're on. I don't know what pill you're on. There's
so many, and I can't pronounce any of them.
They're all the same. They're all basically the same thing. They just have like a different name. But no. So, for example, if I was to you, I'd just minus it, and then we'd still know what your hormones are doing every month. It just won't obviously be to the extent that ours are doing it.
And it's taken into account. It's like, okay, actually, yes, you still have hormones going on inside, but we will take into account that this is what the readings that are given, but you are on the pill because of this, etc.
But going back to your point, not having a bleed for X amount of for over 35 days isn't normal.
No. And also really important, obviously there are signs if you are looking to have a baby, that obviously
well, you won't have a bleed for 10 months.
we need that. But I think there are so many people, especially as I think some more people are thinking about like their lifestyles differently, their lives in general. You know, I think some people do have kids quite young, but some people now do look to sort of that later point because they're not in that position, and maybe sort of think about their life slightly differently, and could be where things start changing hormonally, which isn't necessarily massive things to worry about. It's really important to still know what's going on.
100%. And that's obviously what I speak about in understanding the menstrual guide, because we all need to know so much more about our bodies, and I think that we are taught to sort of be like a little bit naive about it as kids. Like it's not in the educational system whatsoever.
No, and like you say, you sit down, you talk about what goes on, you talk about the pains you might have. Cool, done, dusted.
I literally remember when I was at school, and I mean, do you remember the first time you ever had a period?
Yes, and I didn't tell my mum for ages.
Why?
I don't know why. I was so nervous. I was like, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. You kind of just talk to your friends about what's going on. She'll probably kill me because she would not know that. But I find that, like, I don't know, but I remember, like, you're in such a whirlwind, and it's different ages for different people. So some people, I don't know whether you had it, some people really, really early and really young in secondary school.
Like 11.
And then you've got other people that weren't until like year 9 or 10
know,
or whatever.
yeah.
And it's like too extreme. So you have no idea and you have no reference point to what's going on. And you're like, okay, this just happens once a month now. And for some people, like when I first started, I had horrendous symptoms. I was sick physically every first day. And that's why I went onto the pill, because I couldn't take a day off school a month. As much as I was just so uncomfortable. But to start with, obviously I didn't really, it was because I was on my period, but I didn't say anything to anyone for like a good few months. And so then when I actually started, I was like, nah, this can't go on. And my mum said that she had that when she was younger. So obviously there's symptoms that have kind of, I guess, traded along, but yeah, and that was the reason why, because I was just so ill on like the first couple of days, and I was just, obviously I can't keep that up throughout the whole of school. Would have been a bit much.
I do think that it's sort of changed now, and like there is so many things lifestyle wise where people can actually decrease their menstrual symptoms.
Yeah,
like
hugely.
The inflammation, the pain, they could be massively decreased. But it was funny, actually, the other day I was talking to a client and we were like, do you remember when we were in school and we used to go to the toilet but we're on our period? And we used to like slowly like peel the
pad. Put the hand dryer on.
Yeah. Peel the pad off of the sticky thing and then put it in. And then when you used to like put it in the bin, you used to just slowly
like, it's just,
like it was like a little
crazy.
secret. I remember when I was...
It used to be such a taboo.
I was in school once and I must have been in like year 8. And you know how boys are boys, and this boy went in my bag and he saw a period pad. I was like, oh, he's that period. And I was like, Mom.
And it's crazy. I think it's so different. Obviously, I have no idea what it's like in schools for
I think
that
it's
now.
Just like, we need to emphasise
people just
you're a woman.
Yeah, deal with it.
Yeah.
And even now, I think, you know, if the subjects like that come up or with friends, you end up, like, obviously it's different now to when you're at school. I don't give two monkeys. Like, you know, this is what's going on. Deal with it. Crack on, like, you know, and it is crazy. And I think that's why people don't have it, or previously haven't really spoke about it. I think it is a lot more spoken about now in sort of, and I think we're taking space in so many ways, in sort of the female side of things. And I think we are speaking about it so much more. But I remember my mum being like, you didn't say anything when, like, my mum was younger. She was like, no one said anything to anyone ever, like, and I'm like, that is crazy that was even a thing. It's
so me and my friends are actually working on a children's book at the moment.
Amazing.
So it's like targeted to like children who are like between the ages of like 9 and 14, and it is literally, it's called A Seasons Between Us, because we're not only talking about coming on your period and telling your friends, we're talking about the mum who's in the background crying because she's perimenopausal. Like, that isn't spoken about either. And I think that if we can sort of like mesh the two together and start talking about both of them, like my nan, I spoke to her about it the other day. I actually read the book to her, and she was like, oh my God.
That's incredible.
She was like, it was not even like, we didn't even speak about it when we were younger. She was, I was like, what were your symptoms when you were a kid? She was like, oh, I don't really know, didn't really speak about it. And I feel crazy.
Like people bypass, and they probably had the exact same struggles as we all do, like, you know, and the things that we're experiencing. But to understand it and to, like you say, talk about it, you're taking up so much, like to be able to explain that as such an opportunity for younger people out there, because like you say, we just didn't. And I think, you know, it is still a bit of a shy topic when you're at school. I mean, you know, the maturity levels are slightly different anyway, so it's going to be slightly different. And yeah, you touched on your lovely guide that you have created, and this is completely finished. I'm going to show it for the people who are watching, but also if we have a clip. So a guide to understanding your menstrual cycles. So this is kind of like, I guess, your Bible of understanding everything in a nutshell.
So basic terms, it's all in there. So it's just about basically the different phases and what is happening to your body and your hormones within each phase. That is like the first thing everyone needs to understand, I think.
Read it like 20 times.
Definitely need to understand that. And then it's just like the like nutrition. So like there's some meal plans in there, for example, like anti-inflammatory type things and how to get rid of those pains and things like that before and during your cycle. And then in there is also PMS. I do speak quite a lot about PMS because myself and I know so many other women who do really struggle before they go on their period.
Yeah.
Like that, the irritability, and I'm not even going to go into the symptoms, but
I know
don't want to be in my house.
It's a whirlwind, and I found I have learned so much more about my side of things, even the way I'm on the pill and symptoms might be slightly different. I find that like I take more naps, I'm more fatigued before I come on. My training, things are a little bit heavier, which isn't ideal, but we just got to crack on. And I just notice certain elements of where sleep sits, and I can tell, but just because I've written it down for the past, like, I don't know, year or so, 18 months of keeping track of that, I know, especially weight fluctuations, obviously is something to take into consideration with my training and what I pass on to my coach. I make a note of if I've like taken my weight, I'm like, okay, that's pre-period. Now, sometimes it makes an impact on where that fluctuation sits. Again, it's not a judgment onto where my fat loss journey or gaining phases are in, but it is enabling my coach to understand why that might have been a fluctuation or why I might have a spike. And then I can detach myself from why that spike is because I know it's because of this. And that's more specific to obviously my side of things, but it's people are like, oh yeah, like I kind of get this a month, or I might have this and that's an indication. Let's delve into that a little bit more. Like I think not enough people kind of track what is actually going on.
Yeah, I think obviously, well, if we go through the phases with that, like menstrual phase, heavy, like you feel so, and that, like you do get quite a lot of women I speak to do get quite bad like body dysmorphia within this phase. Like they look in the mirror and they're like, why am I so big? I'm like, you're true, like this is true inflammation. Yeah, like this is true bloating, this is true inflammation. Right, we'll get you on some natural anti-inflammatory type things, turmeric, ginger, spinach. Like we want you,
it's where those foods can really come into play.
And then like cravings, like you get the cravings in your luteal phase of your cycle, but that's just the lack of magnesium that you're getting as well. Like going from your luteal into your menstrual, obviously the bleed, you do decrease that magnesium content. Dark chocolate is my best friend.
Great.
I am just gonna have a whole bar, but that's fine. But I do think as well, like so menstrual phase, then you go into your follicular phase, and this is when you're like trying to eat those estrogen enhancing foods. Then obviously ovulation, you want to keep those estrogen enhancing foods up, and then when you get into that luteal phase, your progesterone enhancing foods, because you can enhance
which are in this.
Yeah,
they're in the book.
I mean, open it up so
we can find the page. So yeah, no, it is really really, really important.
I think as well, like people knowing what symptoms to look out for each phase, and like knowing that it's actually normal to have those symptoms within each phase.
Yeah. So here are so estrogen supported food. You got flax seeds, sesame seeds, chickpeas, lentils, soy products, berries. Can't go wrong. Estrogen and follicle stability. I'm trying to read this out. Dark leafy greens, green tea, beets, citrus fruits. And then just general ovary function, which is new for me to understand this. Eggs, pumpkin seeds, quinoa, oats, brown rice, shellfish, which is really interesting. Like some of this I wouldn't have even, it's, again, I always say to my clients, I don't just tell you to eat your veg because I'm like a really boring person. Like, yeah, eat your veg. Like there are actually reasonings of why we need to have certain macronutrients and certain nutrients within our health, let alone our hormonal health, which is so important to highlight. my client's going to get an earful this evening. Just, I think in understanding it, like this is so good.
Sorry.
But I think it's so good. And then estrogen balance, you've put in here broccoli, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, all the good stuff. But
it is really important. And quite a few of my clients are like vegan. So they don't know that they can still get all of these things in. And like, obviously, quite a lot of the time, I mean, you're meat eater, I'm a meat eater. And I'm like, eat that grass-fed beef. And they're like, I can't eat beef. And I think as well, like that, obviously they can still eat with like the tofu and the quinoa. You still do get those. They are hormone-supporting foods. And then, obviously, the training. You want to talk about the training?
Let's delve into it. I guess where to begin. So when you're looking at your like hormones and menstrual cycle within your training, obviously things can be impacted.
I mean, you mentioned about how you feel heavier.
Yeah.
Well, you feel like everything feels heavier.
And the thing is, I make a note, and again, it's a form of tracking, because I think there's so many different ways to track, and your tracking isn't just, okay, I'm just logging my period on an app. Yes, that is a way to do it. But actually, me writing in my logbook every time I'm on my period or where I am in my cycle, okay, that's a reason because of that, and that, which I've done in my session. It's an easy way and a simple way to kind of keep track of that. And it does. I'm literally like, before. Now, sometimes I just aim to go in with no expectation, because then something good's going to come out of it. I try not to let my sessions beat me. That's never my target. I try and get my head a little bit stronger. But it can impact things, and people get really confused. And people are like, why is this happening? Why is this heavier? Why can't I lift this week to last week? Or, maybe why haven't I been able to get that PB from 1 week to the other? And I guess explain what you said to me about your marathon.
Oh my God.
When did you do it this year? Last year?
Yeah, I literally did Milan Marathon like 3 weeks ago.
Amazing.
But like I really notice it within my training where I am in my cycle.
Yeah.
So Milan, I mean, I was literally on for a sub 4, but then it was hot. I was in my luteal phase. I felt so heavy. Like I just felt like, and no, I didn't PB. And I was just obviously completely upset by it. But I was like, actually, you could
just run a marathon.
I know, but my friend, she was in her follicular phase, she turned to me and she went, maybe it's because you're in your luteal phase, Holly. I was like, did you just tell me something about my menstrual cycle?
Yeah. Why are you telling me? Turn around, hang on a minute.
She was like, I'm in my follicular phase and I've PB'd. I was like, well, this all makes sense now. Yeah. No, obviously, like she have other external factors to apply. But no, I think that training, and I mean, when I'm on my period or when that week leading up to my period, my motivation is completely down.
Yeah.
When I have clients and I am doing their training plans, I only give them 2 sessions per week during their menstrual phase, or depending on their symptoms, or in their luteal phase, because sometimes people just can't train.
Yeah.
When they are in that phase, and that's absolutely fine. I think that us as coaches, like, we should normalize people having like more days off that week if they feel like they need to,
and kind of that active recovery as well. Like, you can still move your body, which feels so good. And I really took away, and I give it as an example to all of my team since you spoke about it at the wellness day, of actually like, by doing movement, I think sometimes we can feel a bit sorry for ourselves, which is welcome. We've got to do it we got it. But equally so, there are things that can distract that pain, that can help with that pain by moving, by yoga, sometimes training, or a light session to adapt that training, whether it's walking. You're still getting some good movement for your body and for your hormones, digestion,
for your mental health as well.
Distraction away from where those cravings and things could come in and could really make an impact if we're focusing on a certain journey. And it's really, really important to recognize that. But sometimes actually some people with certain symptoms may need to adapt their training.
I think so in that menstrual phase, like we said, like doing those lighter sessions, doing that yoga or that active recovery, or like even just lifting lighter weights. I mean, it's actually proven that doing light aerobic exercise decreases menstrual cramps.
Drop the mic. Everyone listen to that again. And it does really, I think it's that resistance as well, because you're pushing where your mind is towards your strength or movement, rather than your mind just focusing on what's going on.
I mean, if you're like, and then they say like in your follicular phase, which is the phase after your menstrual cycle, your menstrual period, go and do like HIIT workouts. Like this is your time that you will be so energetic. And actually, like, we're full of ideas at this point, like business ideas and sitting down. Yeah, exactly.
Productive.
Exactly. Like you've really got to, and my boss at work, she actually plans like when she is going to record content. Content within that phase, because you're follicular, like you're feeling great about yourself.
Time to shine.
Yeah. And then in that luteal phase, you know, like the time before you're about to bleed, just take a step back and just do something, you know, like sit down and plan your podcast for this week.
Yeah.
Like do your creative content in your follicular phase, and then podcast for this week when you just want to sit down and have a little bit of a chat.
Yeah, exactly. It's the best bit. And that is such a valuable thing to take away. Now, everyone's training is very, very different.
So different, yeah.
And how do you, for your trainings, what have you got upcoming? How are you amending? How do you amend? You said you got a coach.
Yes, I do.
So how do you go about it for your training?
Well, I'm sort of like you. We briefly spoke about this, where like obviously because we are training for, like, you're training for a show, I'm training for, I've got a couple of triathlons coming up, and then an ultra and then a marathon later on in the year. So, I'm like crazy.
I love it. No, I love it.
So my coach actually, well, he sort of says to me, he's like, but what if but sometimes you can't obviously adapt your training.
Yep.
He does say if you're in that phase, you know, like
be aware of it.
We will reduce the sessions that you're doing. But at the end of the day, if you're training for something, and say my marathon later on in the year is when I'm on my period, there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah. That's just
like, I cannot plan my marathons around my period. I sort of like,
and it would be a very slim option of when those marathons.
It's a bit upsetting, really. They should really do it around me.
Yeah.
Come on. Literally running Florence Marathon, the whole of Italy has to change it around me.
Come on, guys. And it is really, I really like touching on sort of all aspects of where we can look at our menstrual cycle, whether you are lifestyle, whether you've got specific training needs. And similarly for myself, like the judges don't really, like what they're looking at, they don't know if you're on or if you're not.
Literally, if you're bloated,
you got to deal with it. And obviously there are factors that you can try and plan where shows land, give or take, but the shows don't change.
No,
you've got to just choose which ones are better for you.
Literally,
and you know, with my training, you know, my PBs, in my eyes, of how I think about it, not for everyone. Like my PBs don't care if I'm on my period.
No, your PBs don't. Honey.
They don't care.
No,
so we got to crack on. And you know, I also say to people like, my gains don't care. That's what I want, so I've got to crack on. It is very different. However, being aware of it, like I am in, like, you know, I always have to touch on it with my coach, of where things sit, because then it gives me a reason for why my training could be for XYZ. If it's feeling great, if we've got PBs, or, you know, if things have just matched where they, you know, or if strength has taken a hit now.
I think if you were to do like a PB week, like if I would do like a max 10K or whatever, like my coach and your coach would probably be like, right, do that in your follicular phase.
Yeah.
Just so you are obviously at that maximal potential when you are there. But yeah, I mean, wouldn't it be great if we could plan things?
I know, if only. And you briefly touched on it, but you sort of said during, obviously, your research, and I think you said your lecturer picked up on that we are more likely to suffer with sort of knee injuries and stuff. And do you want to talk about within training where or why that is in certain, because you can lose sort of where that strength is coming from? You're a little bit more sort of mobile, and explain that to everyone, because I found that a really interesting point when you first spoke about it.
Yeah, so ultimately my PhD sort of stemmed from like the lecturer wanted to do something on knee injuries. Now, to get into a PhD, you have to do a presentation about what you wanted. And I always wanted to do something to do with menstrual cycle because, like, obviously we mentioned, like, so important. And they didn't think anyone was going to come with this approach. And I was like, I was up against a surgeon who wanted to do knee injuries for ACL, like, reconstruction and, like, all of this jazz. And then there was me, and I got in against a surgeon. I was like, Mum, I made it.
But it just shows, like, actually, I think more people are willing and wanting to understand it and understand why it is, especially in a world where, you know, I think from, like, a younger generation, everyone is doing sports. There's someone always training in the gym or doing running or marathons. Like, it's in a day and age where everything is busy. Like, people are doing high roxes left, right and centre, ultras, you know, all of that. So how important that we can have this research to base against it.
Yeah. So as a woman, we obviously, estrogen and progesterone are our main hormones. And we've got testosterone just lingering there in the background as well. So when you're in your ovulation phase is when your estrogen is the highest. When you are actually more likely to get injured during your ovulation phase of your menstrual cycle. So within this phase, I literally tell people rehab within this phase. And it is about, so obviously this is the up and coming research and this is what it's saying. So my PhD is actually on knee ligament laxity. So testing how lax the knee is, obviously, like how flexible the knee is within this, within each phase of the cycle. So I'll be doing hormonal saliva tests for my actual research. And I'll be doing that twice a week for my participants, testing their knee laxity and then testing the neuromuscular function. So how strong the actual knee is and if it changes throughout the cycle. And then hopefully in 3 years, I'll come back here and be like, guys, I was right, or guys, I was completely wrong.
Gonna be name up in like arms with it all. But how fascinating that there is, or sort of your findings within that, and how our bodies they change.
They change
of
massively,
the imbalances.
Yeah, like they change so much, and I think as a coach, it's just obviously something to be aware of as well. Like knee and any injury prevention is going to be, you need it
hugely,
and loads of people think that they just train. And as going like delving deep into my sports therapy stuff, people think I just tell them to stretch as a joke. And like and I'm like, no, like this is for a reason. And like the neuromuscular strength, like strengthening like specific small minute movements, like don't just go into the gym and do a squat. Like we need to wake up your glutes and things like that. And as a woman as well, we definitely need to wake up your glutes. Like women naturally are so anteriorly dominant. So as we are literally, so if you imagine our pelvis, we are like this compared to men. So we have this thing called a wider Q angle, which is basically from the top of our hip to the inside of our knee. And we're like this because we're born to carry children. That's ancient history time. We're not born to carry children, by the way, guys. And so we have a wider Q angle. So essentially what this means is we are so quad dominant and we are so hip flexor dominant. So our glutes
are pretty dormant.
They are so weak compared to what they actually need to be. Weak glutes is a major, major contributor to lower back pain. Overactive hamstrings, weak glutes, you are going to get back pain from hell. So a lot of the time I'm like to my clients, right, we need to release, your quads, your hip flexors, and we need to start strengthening up those glutes because our glutes would be our powerhouse. Like they should be our powerhouse.
Yeah.
Like we should get everything from our glutes, especially because they're so big.
Yeah, and it's such a massive muscle. And everything you are just saying, I'm literally like, I wish I could be in the background, like, yes. 'Cause this is everything that I focus on with my team and focus on explaining to my runners.
Yeah.
I don't know how I've gained a team full of runners, but I welcome it. Even though I'm not necessarily, it's not my speciality. But I find that focusing, a lot of injuries come from weak glutes, dormant glutes. And so many people are, I just don't feel it in my glutes. Okay,
well, we need to work on that then.
Start that. And even if it's something, and it's why, I know my clients hate it, but lunges are your friend. We focus on where your glute engagement is. Yes, we know we've got strong quads. Yes, we can do movements that optimize where our main strength comes from. However, if something's dormant, we need to wake it up.
Yeah, we really do.
And so many of my runners, if they're quad dominant, they will obviously get a lot of activation through their quads. Everything else is super tight. Hamstrings are like this, and glutes are doing nothing. Therefore, all of their knee, ankles are completely out of line.
Yeah.
And we notice that. I noticed that so much. So it is so important, and even to then recognize what phase you're in, to understand why this might be happening, which is also a reason why. I literally had a light bulb moment, like, book into your sports massage this week. And it is so important, and how it can come into that training side of things. Fascinating. I am just like, yes, keep going.
I could talk all day.
And I guess to summarize, like, this has been such an epic podcast to film. What would be your kind of biggest advocate for people who are listening, whether it be tracking or understanding in line with their training, paying way more attention? Like, what would be your biggest, or pay more attention to the menstrual cycle? You're just paying attention. Just pay attention. What would be your biggest kind of thing to push to people sort of listening and watching?
I think the biggest thing to push from a sports therapy physio point of view, from a women's health specialist point of view, and for you as a coach, track your cycle and track your symptoms, because we need that to help you to get better. And if we don't have that, then,
and also enhance your training. So if you don't if you're a client who doesn't get much glute engagement, I know some people who do, and they really focus, and actually think about your mind to muscle connection if you're training, where that's actually coming from. And I say it sounds so weird when you say, oh yeah, think about what you're doing, like as if it makes sense, but so many people don't. They'll just go through the motions, like actually have a connection with the muscle that you are working and pushing towards. And tracking can come in all sorts of ways. What have you experienced with your clients that's maybe the best way to track?
So in the back of that book, actually, there is like literally a space for you to track, and tracking your common symptoms within there as well. Just even if you just do it on your calendar app. Even if you just do it on your calendar app, absolutely fine. I personally just use my Garmin app. Because and then you can write down your symptoms. And there's this really cute app actually called Stardust. I don't know if you use it.
I don't, but I'm intrigued. I want to use it now.
It's so good. You like put in where you're on your cycle, and then it gives you like a little motivational quote every day. So like,
I love this.
So like, say if you're obviously like, I don't know, for example, I'm normally every 33 days. Say if I like reach 34, it's like, don't worry, I'm sure it will come tomorrow.
Oh, I love it.
And you can like put in there, like if you feel bloated, or like obviously you can put in your symptoms, and it just looks pretty as well.
Love it. And I think that's the perfect example of tracking your cycle, is not just sort of saying to something when you bleed. Like, it's way more.
Yeah. So take home's definitely be menstrual, when you first day of your bleed, first day of your cycle, track it from there. Tell us how you're feeling within each phase. Jot it down how you're feeling every single day. And obviously I'll be able to help, you'll be able to help, you'll be able to ask me for help.
Yeah, we can team up.
But it will just make such a huge difference to your overall lifestyle and your overall well-being. I guarantee you, if you start tracking your symptoms, you'll be 10 times happier.
Yeah.
Because it will just change your life, and I can't even describe that.
Yeah. It's crazy. And I found, I mean, I briefly mentioned it to you, recently got the Aura Ring, which links so closely with cycle tracking, which I found really interesting. So in link with my heart rate and my core temperature and how that fluctuated my symptoms and how prior to coming on, my temperature was like raised completely. And then it went level and now it's obviously decreasing slightly. And I've just found it so interesting. So there are so many ways, like you say, your watch, different apps. And obviously if you do have any questions about them, I'm sure Holly will be happy to answer. I can do my very best with what I use myself and the way I track my cycle. Obviously appreciate that both of us do things a little bit differently. And also for our training is very differently as well, let alone if you're just someone sort of looking from a lifestyle point of view to just improve things. And if you do have any other questions, I will tag all of Holly's accounts. We will be posting clips. You will be able to find this on Spotify, on Apple as well, to link it. And the second I've got it, I will ping it across. And yeah, any questions for either one of us, just let us know. Or if you have any more questions from it and you want us to come back on and speak about further topics, maybe delving into sort of the more menopausal, like HRT, like we can go into all of those things. And I think it would be helpful for so many others. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me. It's been so good to speak about all of this. And if you are interested in Holly's guide, obviously she is just a message away as well. Thank you so much. And hopefully we will see you on the next episode. A big thank you for joining me on my channel and tuning in. Find me on Spotify, Apple and Google Podcasts, Amazon and YouTube, A Diary to Empower. Follow me on Instagram, m_power.fitness and TikTok, m.ibert. See you on the next episode.